As an immigrant from Chile, Pierre-Bravo spent many years undocumented and in the shadows. She worked odd jobs to pay her way through school before finding an opening in the media industry and eventually becoming a reporter on MSNBC. In her new book, The Other: How to Own Your Power at Work as a Woman of Color, she writes about her journey and the lessons she's learned along the way. Daniela Pierre-Bravo, good morning to you. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. You know, what I love about the book is that you talk about, as an immigrant, that there are really great things about entering the workplace, of hustling and having this work ethic. But then you talk about how that can change, and it's not so great anymore.
Yeah, well, the immigrant ethos is a beautiful thing, right? You know, my mom and my grandma always taught me to put my head down and do the work, right? Be grateful for everything. It's the energy that got me from undocumented to be able to go to college, to getting on an 18-hour bus ride because I lied on my resume and said that I lived in New York just so that I could get an opportunity to get an unpaid internship.
Wow.
But, you know, by the same token, when we advance in our career, especially for women of color, when we're constantly leading with that overly grateful mentality to the point where we fear asking for more because we don't want to be ungrateful, it can kind of not work in our favor. And by the way, if you put your head down and do the work in corporate America, if you don't let people know what you're doing, no one's going to notice.
You got to brag about yourself a little bit.
Brag. Don't be humble. The book, speaking of not being humble, I'll not be humble for you. You got a great voice. You got a delicate touch. It's going to help a lot of people. And you describe a moment in the book. It's sort of part career advice and then part memoir. And in the memoir part, you talk about a breaking point for yourself when you started thinking about change. Can you talk about that breaking point?
Yeah, I think for a lot of women of color, we experience this breaking point of burnout. And, you know, for a lot of our communities, we have been in constant survival mode. That fight or flight is very familiar to us. So we tend to find and recreate those moments in our career to the point where we feel like our worth is predicated on our productivity. And it's hard for us to shift that mindset. And we know that as women go on in their careers, we need to play by different rules. We can't be constantly in that customer service mentality.
Right.
And it's hard because that means that we need to say no to some things that we advise.
How do we do that?
And it's hard, right? And especially for women of color, because we don't want to cause that cognitive dissonance. We don't want to put people at dis-ease, but it's so important as we move along in our career.
You know, I really try to cheerlead other women.
Yeah.
But I even find it hard to cheerlead myself. What are some tips for people that you would, if you're speaking to other women, that you give them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, we're so lucky now, especially Gen Z, as they come up in the workplace. Gen Z is going to be the most diverse generation out there. And when I think about as a woman of color who is sometimes the one and only in a room, it's not just about me. Right? It's about the advocating that I do for myself, but the more room that I leave for other women behind us. And I think that's important, that we're not just cheerleading ourselves, and it's not just about us, but it's about the door that we leave even wider for the women after us.
Yeah, pay matters, pay negotiations matter.
Oh, yeah.
What tips do you have on that front? And you write about why, even if you get a no at first, you shouldn't stop at no.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of great tips on negotiation in the book, but that's exactly right. It's so important to not leave that negotiation and just assume the no is forever. So what you want to do is you want to make sure to talk to your manager and say, okay, what are the metrics that I missed? And what are the qualifications and the metrics that you're looking for so that they meet them? And make sure that you don't leave there without putting a time on their calendar, whether it's 3 or 6 months, to have this conversation, to check in, because you don't want to wait a full year for the next performance review.
Yeah.
You really have to know your worth, though. And sometimes that can be really hard.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's so important to talk about it and talk about it often. You know, in this remote work kind of life that we're going through, it's even more important.
Yeah.
It's more than okay. It's necessary. And, you know, it's hard to be a manager at this time. There's a lot of things that they're juggling. So help them help you. And one way by doing that is to make sure that you're having consistent conversations, whether it be weekly or biweekly, about what are the wins that you're bringing to the table.
I like that a lot. Daniela Pierre-Bravo, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
The Other: How to Own Your Power at Work as a Woman of Color goes on sale tomorrow. You can pick it up.